Does anyone have any changes, questions, concerns, or a motion to approve?
A motion to approve.
Vicky, motion, second by Lucretia. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose and abstain. Yes, thank you.
I wasn't here either.
Okay, well, 1, 2, 3. Someone's gonna have to go ahead and vote yes, even though you weren't here. So
I won't.
you cool with that? Yeah. Typically, you don't have to abstain if you weren't here,
Okay.
but you have more
Because
knowledge of what
Jackie would
normally
have
happens than
read it.
Jackie would, so that
That's
would be good. So we'll do Jackie abstain and Karen is a yes, so we do have. Oh, I guess we don't need you though, do we? We have 3 to 1 to 1. We can approve minutes with 3 to 1 to 1, right? 1, 2, 3. 1 to 1, 3 to 1 to 1, 3 to 2, 3 to 0 to 2. I'm sorry, boy, my math's terrible. We can approve the minutes with 2 yeses, 0 nos, 2 abstentions. Jackie and Karen, thank you very much. Sorry about that. Well, hopefully the meeting will start going along a little smoother here. So we do have 2 things on the agenda tonight. First, we'll go to executive session to finish up one case, and we haven't had any new cases get filed. So we're going to shift into this. Council asked for some advice on strategic media buying. I have a PowerPoint and a couple handouts to review when we get back from the short executive session. So 15 minutes is all we're thinking. Would you like to go ahead and make a motion?
I move that the Ethics Advisory Board recess into executive session for 15 minutes to receive information and legal advice on 2 ethics complaints pursuant to KSA 75-4319 subsection B2 for legal consultation with Ethics Advisory Board's legal counsel, which will be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship for legal advice. The executive session is required to protect the attorney-client privilege and the public interest. The executive session on the matter will begin at
6:04.
and will end at
6:19.
19, yes. 6:19, and the Ethics Advisory Board will resume here in the Everdream classroom.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
You gotta be quick. Good try though, Jackie. Vicky second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We have 5 to 0 on that. We will now adjourn to the little executive session room and come back here
And let the record show that no binding action was taken in executive session.
Thank you. So do we have any motions coming out of executive session now?
A motion to accept the summary report.
Vicky has moved and seconded by
I'll second.
Karen is seconded, and the motion is to adopt the revised report on ethics complaint 2205A as the final determination of the Ethics Advisory Board, right?
Yes.
Any discussion, questions, comments, concerns? You all have in front of you a draft report that we drafted and you reviewed and discussed in executive session. What's new is section 6 and 7, essentially affirming the decision that the EAB made on May 11th. Yeah, May 11th. And recognizing the response from Mr. Stout, but affirming the previous decision with no further. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And motion carries. And that's 5-0. Okay, so now we move into the next part of our agenda. This revised report will be put online in the morning. So it'll be on wichita.gov at the very bottom of the homepage, where you click on Ethics Advisory Board. It'll be added to that, so available to the public at that time. Now, we're going to shift into the next agenda item. I'm about to stand up because I have a PowerPoint presentation to show you all, but I should preface it. On your agenda, it does note that this next item is called Strategic Media Buying, Brand Marketing, and Advertising Services, which are 3 different things, but we were asked to work on this. So part of my presentation is defining what these 3 different words mean. For those of us not in that business, it can be a little confusing, but recently the city council required a specific phrase be added to 2 contracts. One was a media buying contract and the other one was brand marketing contract. And John, do you mind shutting that door back there? I just noticed. I don't want to bother people in the library. So the city council put this new requirement on 2 individual contracts, and then they're thinking about, well, should this be a policy? Should it apply to more? And I think the manager kind of suggested that, hey, you have an ethics advisory board. Some of the council members' concerns were ethics or conflicts of interest. And so they wanted to, they asked for you all as a board to review this issue. And then they asked me and the PPMC to kind of do the background and the research on the issue. Is it a clicker? No, there's not a clicker. Okay. I didn't even think to ask for that. Now I'm going to give you all the PowerPoint because I know sometimes folks like to take notes as we go along. Sometimes as we converse, I'll go through stuff kind of fast. So there's a lot of terminology that's different than what we're used to here. So I know sometimes it helps to go back and look at things on the paper instead of on the overhead. So Brooke, I guess it's a you and me deal, huh? Yeah, we'll figure this out. So first of all, let me just say that as you all know, the city hired WSU, the PPMC, back in December just to support the EAB, the Ethics Advisory Board, and support and help define better the code, working out some of the glitches in the code, and to help get through all these cases that you just got through the last one on file. So there's my camera, isn't it? I should stand here. So they reached out April 11th, the city manager reached out to me talking about this issue because the city council had just dealt with it on April 11th and the prior Tuesday as they were trying to approve a contract for pop media. So a specific contract that came up and they decided to put to do some additional things, and they asked for the Ethics Advisory Board to go ahead and review that. So go ahead, yeah. And so today, what I'll first do is define the scope. It might help if you have one to let me know. Thank you. So first we'll define the scope of what we were asked to deal with and look at what other cities are doing, and then briefly touch on some First Amendment implications. Because one of my jobs is to tell the city that we're not doing First Amendment research, that you need to have your law department do that. But the next slide shows you that the contractor requirements that were put in two specific contracts. Specifically reads that the contractor would not accept employment or paid engagement for participation in any media campaign for which a city council or mayor. And as we all know, there was a filing deadline last week, so we're now in campaign season for the city of Wichita. So before that season started, they were asked to approve these two contracts, one with a marketing firm for the airport work, and one a media buying firm. So that's why it probably got it on their minds, and they put this in the contracts, and both firms agreed to the contract, is my understanding, with that in it. So that's really not our issue. Our issue is, should this requirement become policy going forward? Should it be added to a request for proposal? So if you're gonna hire someone for professional services, it's either very minor and it's below a threshold, dollar threshold, or you put it out for proposals for different firms to propose. Well, you don't want to, you know, business practice wise, you'd rather tell them up front what all the requirements are, rather than have a requirement come up at the last minute. So the question is, should it be included in RFPs and contracts going forward for media buying or brand marketing or both or something else? And then what ethical decisions should be considered? So the scope of what we're talking about here is, should additional businesses be subject to this recent restriction on participating in council elections? So no one's really asking you all to look at what the council did last in April, and whether it applies to those two companies who willingly agreed to, you know, do that term to get the contract. But it should it be applying to additional businesses? And if so, which additional businesses? One of the conversation pieces that came up in the council meeting was, where does this stop? If it's media buying and then it's marketing, brand marketing, is it also advertising, like placing ads in the Eagle or, you know, newspapers or televisions, or is it other stuff? Is it printing, those kind of things? So it's like, how far does this go? So we felt like we could tackle that. So on the next slide, you'll see that what we did is, and I'll give you this other handout. This is a humdinger of a handout. We asked for data from the city's purchasing. So we asked, this is the pared down spreadsheet, which you don't need to get into totally, but when you look at the last sheet, it'll give the summary. And I'll go over the highlights in the PowerPoint, but I wanted you all to have the source data in front of you as I talked about it. So what this slide shows you is city expenditures over the last 3 years in media buying, marketing, and advertising. The first list that the IT people pulled for it was much longer than this, and we started trying to sort through things and take things out. But essentially what we learned is that there's the top 5 departments are where most of the money is. Vast majority of the money is 1.1 million is in these top 5 departments. So remember I mentioned that April 11th deal with the two companies were both for the airport. So you can see when you see this pie chart, for example, that 77% of all the money that the Wichita city spends on media buying and brand marketing and that kind of thing, advertising, is the airport. Okay, so what the council did in April affected the vast majority. Now, they probably didn't realize that, but that's what you find when you get the data. You know, those are the two big contracts that affect most things. Then not in the scope. What we were able to do by going through all this list is pull out some things and figure out what's not in scope. So we were able to pull out, and it's not in this spreadsheet, all the entries for monthly printing of water bills. As you can imagine, when you pull based on category or codes, you see the first page is advertising, and then later it looks to the marketing consultants. But a lot of things get put in advertising, not so many things get put in marketing consultants, but before I pared the list down, it had other stuff like printing, or some of these, for example, are signs. There's a couple of like they made a sign to go on bus, transit authority, bus sign. Well, right, that's a creative thing. Somebody made a sign. So what we pulled out then were all the printing of the water bills, printing of things like, have you seen Evolve, the magazine thing that's like a program guide for the Park and Rec department? Pulled that out because all they're doing is printing it. You know, it's just a print job. Then we pulled out the publishing of all standard routine ads, like we have a job open. Let's put that in the paper. Let's put that online, you're publishing job ads, legals. In cities, we have lots of legally required notices. Notice of a hearing, notice of an annual plan for the housing department. Notice of, there's all kinds of legal publications of financial documents and budget hearings and things like that. So we took all that stuff out. And so there's really no discretion there. You have to publish it in the required publication. Then in the report, there were a few little things that we took out. If you look at page 1, the third line, it's in bold 1490 with an asterisk. Okay, so that's an example of, we pulled out the CMO, City Manager's Office Administration, where they just bought an ad in the Community Voice and some other publication, Wichita Eagle, for the Excellence in Public Service Award. So in other words, the city designed the ad and just sent it to 2 newspapers to put that ad as a PR thing, right? There's really no discretion, it's very minor. That we removed. In other words, that would not be something that we're talking about. But the following items, there's some of those as well that we'll talk about more, but they certainly fall under the advertising and marketing. But the other things, just like that top line one I mentioned that were taken out, were municipal court. There were a couple of very minor publications in 2020, and transit, the bus, the sign on the bus route. The other thing I took out was the convention center. So when you look at page, yeah. So, oh, I forgot to number the pages. Well, there you go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Page 4, there's a half of the page of the convention center. Well, those are all from 2020 because I'm starting to think, okay, if I'm doing a 3-year look back, I'm going to pull that out because I don't have anything past 2020. I only have 1 year. And why is that? Because anything the council's doing now won't affect them because they contracted out management of the convention center. In 2020, it was managed as city staff. Now it's being managed by an outside company. So a city council new policy should not affect that anyway. So I pulled that out. So that just gives you on this slide a list of things that the first ones I pulled out, you don't even see them on the list. The second ones are minor, similar but minor, but in my opinion, not in the scope of what we're talking about. And then the last thing is also on the list, but if you sort through the list more, what you see is those things that are just publishing. So Active Aging is a vendor. TCV, that's the Community Voice, both are newspapers. City departments are designing and sending specific ads to those papers, for example. It's just printing in the paper. That is not what we're talking about today. That is, in my view, it should be removed from consideration. Because when you talk about a slippery slope, that's crazy. Because you're not issuing RFPs. There's no professional service. It's just printing what you told them to print. You control the content at the city level. So that's my thinking about what's not in scope, which is one of the things they asked us to do is how far does this go? Well, let's first take all that off the table. And then it leads us to the next slide, which is we're back to just media buying and marketing service. So what is that? Let's define it. Media buying is when you hire a company and their expertise is not designing the ad. It's not saying, we've seen the Nebraska ad lately. It's not for everyone. It's like these little slogans. It's not brand marketing. All it is saying, we know, our profession is, we know what ads cost at KSN. We know what they cost at Eagle. We have it Sky at Cox Media, and we know how to place ads on the cable television news. And we've got these intercom and all these radio stations, and we know we have contacts with all these folks, and we know from a professional standpoint the demographics. If we put it on this website, it'll reach moms over 30 or whatever. And if we put it on this one, it'll reach grandparents over 50, whatever. So they have that kind of intelligence about the professional service they're providing the client is, if you have a $10,000 marketing budget and you want to reach, X group of people, here's how to best spend your money. Put this amount on cable news, put this amount online, put this amount, that type of thing. So they don't create content, but it is a professional service. They're figuring out how to spend the money. Now, the other one is brand marketing or marketing services. And that, in this document is mostly Bredeman Group. And so Bredeman is, an organization that they're gonna bill hourly for their services rendered, and they're creative. They don't tell you where to place it per se, they don't have all these relationships, they're gonna create the brand campaign, the marketing campaign, and then either hand it back to the client or hand it to the media buyer and say, go buy. So that's why this is two different things. In this list of expenditures over 3 years, those two, Bredeman doing marketing and COP doing media buying are the vast majority of the total bills. But stay tuned and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. What I also found was one was called Nexstar. And what I found is they had, it's on page 2 and 3 mostly. They had a contract and 4, they had a contract with Cowtown for several years. And that was for creating a campaign and placing the ads. So it was literally doing some of both creative marketing, just like Redmond, and placing ads, just like Pop Media. So that just gives you a sense of the largest ones and where we're at on that. On the next slide, we get into that a little bit more on media buying. Why is this $676,000? That seems like a lot, right? Remember, it's over 3 years. So let's just call that about 200 grand a year. Well, here's what I found out that works. So when Pop Media gets paid and sends invoices to the city, it may have invoiced a total of 676,000, but really the amount they were getting paid over 3 years for their professional services was 101,000. And it's because of this formula, the way they do the invoices. So if I'm the media buyer, I don't pass along a bill or say, hey, KWCH, why don't you just send a bill to the city? KSN, you send it, and then the city's got to process like 12 different bills, right? No, they send the media buyer the bill. That way the media buyer is providing professional service of making sure nobody overcharged you, making sure you got the rate you were, you had agreed to, you're doing all the payments. But when the media buyer sends the city the bill, they're adding up all those media buys and getting their 15% professional fee. That's typically what it is. Most ads that they are doing are going to be a 15% commission or their professional fee on them. So you can see the example there, and what it really tells you bottom line then is over 3 years, the city of Wichita paid Pop Media about $34,000 a year. So what starts out thinking, well, this is this huge contract, you realize, oh no, it's really not. About $34,000 a year. So that's not even a half-time position. Obviously, if the city were doing this kind of work, you'd have to have some specialized people, and you don't even have enough work for even a half-time position, let alone the other benefits you get with a contractor. So did the same kind of math work for Nexstar, for the Cowtown group, and that came out to $8,200 over, per year, over 3 years. So only a couple $1,000s a year. So you realize that too was a very small item. And then Bredeman, when you go back to the previous slide, was 272,000 total, and that there might be a couple of exceptions in there, but pretty much those are Bredeman's fees. And that's over 3 years. So for less than 100,000 a year, you're getting the marketing, the brand development. And when you look at the detail, I think this is helpful to see the last far right column on all the Bredeman expenses. I think it's nice that they have this kind of data in their computer system, because it tells you, well, this was for the November deal, and this was for IFY Wichita campaign, and this one was for the summer travel campaign. This one was for website maintenance. Well, this is for, these billboards that we did about Frontier, that particular airline doing something special. So you kind of get a feel for how it's not just saying, hey, fly from Wichita. There's all kinds of different things, a spring break campaign. Airport specific. So every once in a while they do a new campaign and new graphics, and then they have to update those things for billboards and website and what have you. So it gives you a feel for the different types of things they do. So I think all that being said, we got to this point of, okay, I think we're better at defining the scope of what we're talking about now. What's next is, what are other cities doing? This is summarized much shorter. I haven't given you much to look at there, and that's because we didn't find much, okay? We first searched, did general searches for policies restricting marketing and strategic media buying vendors from participating in elections, didn't really find anything at all. We looked at 9 specific cities that were quoted in a 2021 report before you all existed as the EAB. There was a conversation that the city council did in 2021, trying to figure out how to do this ethics thing. And that's where they wrote the policy and, they wrangled over it. There've been several workshops and what have you. Well, one thing they found is they were trying to get information and couldn't find much. So they commissioned this National League of Cities little study in 2021 about what are other cities doing on ethics policies and how do they set up their ethics board and how do they write the policies, how do they enforce it and all this. Well, when they gave me that and I looked over it, I found that there were 9 cities quoted in there that they specifically looked at. So I said, well, let's go look at those specific 9 cities and see if we we didn't find anything. All we found was this note I put on Albuquerque, one of the 9 cities. They have a piece that says that the city has to publish online, put on their website, a list of vendors that have current contracts with the city and who have some of their employees who have contributed to campaigns in the past 4 years. So it was the only thing remotely close among those 9 cities. And I think that'd be difficult, right? I mean, I don't know any business person who asks all their employees. I mean, so I don't know if they're requiring them to all ask their employees or if somebody's looking that up. And for the city to be required to put it online, you'd have to find the data somehow. Somebody'd have to go to campaign reports and look it all up. So I don't see that as a solution, but I thought it was at least interesting that somebody was trying to do something in that area. Then we also did general searches and using ChatGPT and Bing AI system, and that didn't help. And of course, we went direct emails then to 59 large cities. The city manager, Bob Layton, is on this network of large city, kind of listserv. You send each other, you send colleagues your email requests of, hey, we're trying to work on this. Anybody done this? Hey, we're trying to look at that. So we wrote an email out that explained, we're really trying to find out if you're doing anything in this area of restricting marketing firms from participating in campaigns. And then we asked the second question. We asked, if you're not, have you considered it, but decided not to? We were kind of thinking about the First Amendment issues there. We thought, well, maybe some other people have looked into this and figured out maybe they shouldn't go there. Well, we got very few responses. 2 I thought were kind of interesting were Charlotte, North Carolina. What they told us is, no, I mean, we cannot restrict businesses in an ordinance or a statute. You can't restrict them by law. And then they have a statute that says if you cannot restrict businesses of something in statute, you can't restrict them in a contract either. So they were pretty clear about it. Not only do we not do this, we can't use a contractual provision to get around the fact that we can't do it in the ordinance. Las Vegas, they just had one that restricts content of digital sign advertising. And I imagine a number of cities do this. I remember dealing with this in Derby. If you own the sign as a city, it's your property, and you contract with a sign company to sell the ads on the sign, you own the sign. So of course you could say, just like any of you, if you owned a sign because you have a farm on the highway or something, you can say, well, I have the sign, but I'm not going to let you advertise, in this case, political content, adult content, or cannabis related content. So again, really not related to this, but it was good of them to reply to us and just know that that's the kinds of restrictions that do exist out there that are reasonable. So what's our conclusion here in blue at the bottom of the slide is that nobody's doing this. So this is not common. So getting involved in something like this, you'd be breaking new ground. And so obviously you need to tread carefully and thoughtfully about that. So our next part of our scope and our agenda tonight, 4 things on the third one is First Amendment implications. So you all might have other views, but my thinking was free speech And then, is the contractual provision even enforceable? But I didn't get into any research on this matter and no one is per se, asking you all to, but I think if we just recommend that they ask their law department to look into the First Amendment aspects and brief them with a legal opinion or an executive session briefing or whatever, but we're making I just didn't have that kind of time, and I think they have access to court decisions and other research that they don't need you all to do that for them, so to speak. So options going forward, and this is where you get to talk and weigh in. So I just have a couple slides left here, but this is just what I came up with. If you were going to go forward, where does all this information and data lead you to? Well, one is do nothing more, you could even say, because you've already passed these two contracts with these two provisions, and as the data showed, that deals with 80% of the money you're spending in this space anyway. And so if not more, so you've done something already, you could just stop now. Number two is you could include in your future RFPs and contracts for media buying service only. And as you can see, number three is only the marketing services. So the idea is distinguish them. These are different. Both are professional services, but one is purely creative of, hey, here's an ad campaign. Okay, what does that have to do with whether I help somebody on their campaign or their political campaign or not? I'm not sure. And if you all see a connection, speak up. But the media buying is the other piece. And again, council saw it on both. So, I guess the idea being if they see a connection on both, then they could pursue both. But I chose to separate them on the slide to make it clear. If you see a connection on one, doesn't mean you see it on the other, because they are two completely different professions or services. So just a thought. Now in blue, what I've added in here, just to be real clear, is even though the issue was titled and advertising, that in my opinion, and I don't know if you agree, but I just put it in here, is that I think we just remove the basic advertising. If the city is creating the content and just has an ad to say, hey, we're having this event in this park on the weekend, here, put that in the paper for me, or put that on TV for me. There's no real professional service. It's just publishing the ads. So if you could take all those out, then you'd realize the slippery slope's going to go away, because you don't have hardly any other firms providing media buying or brand marketing for the city. It's very rare. And then, of course, the legal advice on First Amendment is kind of my last option. You might have other options you thought of. This is just what I came up with. And if you want to go to the next slide, these last two are what we'll focus on in discussion. But to me, I would just say, if you have any thoughts about, are there ethical issues involved? What would they be? Is there some sort of conflict of interest, perhaps? Is there something that pertains, ethical issues that pertain to media buying and marketing services that don't pertain to other contractors? Think about, the vast majority of contractors probably that the city does business with would probably be like engineering firms and construction firms and other types of contractors. And then, is there a difference between the media buying and the creative marketing? And then the word equitable is a stand-in there for is it right? I guess if you want to weigh in on this, would be one other thing to weigh in on, is now that the city has made this apply to two businesses, is it ethical or equitable to not have it be a policy? I mean, you've treated these two businesses different from everybody else. So do you fix that, so to speak, by making it a policy, or is that not something to be dealt with? So that's a lot, I realize, and I'm going to sit down and let you all, hash through this and ask questions, give ideas, whatever. My intent is to go to this workshop on June 27th is a council workshop, and this is the first item on the agenda. My intent is to probably edit my PowerPoint a little bit, because sometimes when you give it, you learn things, but then certainly add more here about what your all's thoughts are here at the end. And so The floor's open.
Was this added because of a perceived problem or more preventive? They just were concerned it might happen, and so maybe we ought to have it just in case. I didn't know what was the motivating factor behind doing this.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't. All I can say is, the paper was there, the newspaper was there, and they reported on the council meeting. I didn't hear any problems or allegations of wrongdoing in the past, so I'm going to say I think it was just trying to be preventive of future problems. Actually, the article in the paper did say something about the last election, though, and Cop Media did work for one of the candidates, a couple of years ago. I don't know if there was a clear connection, but at least enough that there was someone working there. I did also hear afterward that Greteman willingly signed the contract because they have a company policy. They don't work on campaigns. So it was no big deal to sign the contract for them, but Cop Media, there's only so many firms in town that place ads in places. And apparently Nexstar is something similar, probably not. I don't know. There might be others. I haven't done exhaustive research, but at least Cop Media didn't have a company policy. So they do help campaigns, or probably anybody else who wants to buy media ads.
Is the potential conflict of interest that the city council approves the RFPs and who gets them? Is that the implication?
As what's the conflict of interest? City council. My impression is the idea of concern about ethical issue or a conflict of interest would be, okay, you're doing work for the city. Do you learn things or gather intel, information that then helps you be more successful running a campaign, or I say working for a campaign, placing ads for that campaign? So are you using intellectual property that you gained from one contract with the city, actually using it in a city election campaign? That might have been their concern about, is that a conflict that you're helping a campaign while you're
Well, this seems to only prohibit employment or payment. If someone wants to volunteer on a campaign, it doesn't look like that would cover it.
That's true. They wrote it as, this is about doing work for a campaign as your company. Nothing to do with individuals who work at the
You want to
company.
put up yard signs or
Exactly,
make
yeah.
a campaign contribution
Yeah.
or something like that.
And that's a really good point. It is limiting. I mean, it isn't trying to reach too far into people's personal decisions.
It's a lot different than that other one with Albuquerque. It's wanted to know all employees have contributed. to the
Exactly.
campaign.
It really is different. Yeah.
On that same note, I don't know that what they're trying to do can actually solve the problem of, if you have a good friend who happens to work for a marketing campaign and you want to sit down and talk with them, conversation's still going to happen and they're not going to be able to stop that. It seems, I like your recommendation of do nothing, or if you do something, definitely remove basic advertising from the consideration. It's a solution in search of a problem that's just not really customizable.
Yeah. I think when you look at the whole idea of the marketing, right, it's not about placing ads, just like Greteman doing the creative. You hire on with the client who says, okay, I want to sell this airplane to these people. Help me figure out an ad campaign. Or I want to, whatever it is, they're just trying to help you figure out how to get whatever it is you want done.
Right.
So, I guess I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say, if a marketing company is doing a campaign for, a political candidate, does that mean that's the same way they're voting in the voting booth as individuals? Does that mean they believe it? Well, they're getting paid to do a service, so.
And you don't want to get to where to really solve the problem. I think you have to get down to where you're connecting some of those dots. And that just seems like something that our government doesn't really want to do.
Yeah.
Have to ask, like Albuquerque did.
The idea of, I guess the other piece of it is on the media buying. Okay, did you gain information or knowledge through a contract that then you use? Well, I mean, if you think about professionals, you gain knowledge about whatever work you do, right? And so, again, is it related? Well, you could say, well, I learned more from my contract with WSU on this or that, or my contract with Spirit Aerosystems on this or that. So, I mean, I'm in this market. I know all these media companies. I know what the demographics are. But is there anything specific about a Wichita contract that would give you some sort of leg up? Or better rates? Are you passing on better rates that you got better rates? And I don't think we know the answer to that, but if maybe some of the city council members, did or felt they did, I don't know, and they felt that justified it, but.
Yeah, I would avoid issuing a conclusion from us that would line that something is or isn't an ethical violation in regards to this hypothetical situation. Particularly since this scope or purpose of our board is to enforce the city's ethics policy. Which applies to appointed or elected officials, not. But it does allow for the ethics officer, which we don't have much of that, and defaults to the rest of us, provide education to officials when appropriate and responses to ethical inquiries made by the council. One might assume that within the scope of the policy. And if you don't have it in front of you, there are multiple conflicts of interest provisions. Most obvious one is elected officials being involved in transactions or being involved in decisions having to do with companies that they have interest in or don't. I don't think that's what we're talking about here. They should refrain from assisting and representing the private interests of another before any commission or board, and refrain from unduly influencing city staff on projects benefiting private parties.
I could see a little bit of that. Projects
For
benefiting.
another reason, this applies, it's still a little murky. So I think it'd be hard to fully fathom or predict what specific conflict. What potential appearance of conflict. Utilizing a vendor for your campaign, which you would have to assume might have negative ads against an opponent. Using a vendor who advocates and promotes the city and has access to podcasts. I don't think there's a advertising agency client privilege
No,
necessarily.
open record.
But it might be an unfair advantage, yes. And it gets a little sketchy if the vendor somehow noted in the materials for the city, and then someone would say, well, Sally's using Acme advertising, and that's who's doing all the city's advertising. Maybe that's what should be. I don't know. That's pretty special.
It's the idea of an appearance of conflict, and that's a really good point, is when they put the contract language in there, it did say it was to avoid an appearance
That's about
of
that.
impropriety.
At this point, I'm not sure if it really falls within the policy, but
Would it be possible Since everything goes back to the policy at each meeting, just to have one for reference.
It's a great idea, yeah. I usually bring 2 copies, my own and another one, and I'm not sure if it's right here. I know it's in this. But I think I hear, yeah, we could share a couple here. Sure, where my other copy went. But essentially, John, yeah.
I stopped bringing the.
Yeah, really. Here's one. I think this is what John's looking at, this statement of policy on page 2 where it says A through I. And then there's J through P on the next page. And John, I think you pointed out if what the city council was wanting this board to do was look at this policy and compare and say, are there any issues with what they have done or are contemplating doing with this code of ethics for them as individuals, right? I think the ones you just pointed out were F and I. F being avoid conflicts of interest. As individual city council people, avoid conflicts by refraining from participating in decisions or being involved in transactions in which they, their relatives, or business entity have an interest.
We pause right there. To me, that takes care of, we're voting to renew Acme's contract and they're doing my advertising and I'm giving them $5,000. That would be my, as the elected official, that'd be my call to the carpet to either disclose or abstain. I mean, both.
So hiring them
Well,
on an individual basis, having an interest. Is that what you're saying?
you might have been looking at I.
Let me see.
And I'm also looking at the old version.
Let me see.
Yeah, so mine's the most current either.
Well,
Well, it depends on the threshold of how much money you're giving them. At a certain threshold, you get a substantial interest.
the EAB site, wichita.gov, at the bottom of the page on the EAB, open the policy up.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a conflict if you stand to gain a certain amount to a certain threshold. I just see it as there's a statutory conflict of interest there. But I think it, again, I guess I'm just reiterating my own point, that to me, it goes back to the burden is on that council member to not do this. And I think it's not helpful, it's kind of confusing, and it limits that business's ability to get business in the area. Not a lot of advertising companies.
Yeah, and if they do an RFP, and I don't know, I think they did on at least one of these two, maybe both of them. And then you're selecting the firm based on those, who gave the best one. So if I'm voting on that as a council member, I would disclose something or just not vote on one if I had a relative or myself or my business entity, right, on F. But that, of course, doesn't address an appearance of a conflict. But if I had a relative, so I think it was that John was saying, refrain from assisting and representing the private interests of another before any commissioner board, and refrain from unduly influencing city staff on projects benefiting private parties. So that would be like, this company worked for me on my campaign. They were really good. And that's why I'm trying to influence others to vote or to recommend influence city staff to recommend them, or influence other council members to, accept the bid, because then you're benefiting the private party. So we could write that up as, these are the things from the EAB that you should pay attention to on these two sections, is that if you have dealt, you just want to be careful about promoting or benefiting a private party
mean, there's
Yeah.
a question of application to this situation, but
Yeah,
I guess there's some scenario and there. Trigger, but one of them clearly has to do with family members or interests in the business. That has business that comes before the council. I don't know what that has to do with. The dual, private campaign city deal unless hiring them satisfies the having an interest. The company, which I'm not sure that's.
Well,
constantly.
yeah, I mean, I've had,
Contemplated ownership, but
Mhm.
not being a client. I mean, so you eat at McDonald's. Well, you eat at McDonald's a lot. Every day, and then they have business before. The council, I don't think you're conflicted out. If you're a client of an advertising firm. For your own private business. Is that a conflict if they have business that comes before the council?
I guess I'm looking at item P on our list. And that's the very last one, and it says remain impartial in your consideration of the city's business, including the approval of public policies and awarding of contracts. Council members should not be unduly influenced by family relationships, business interests, or religious affiliation and formulation or adoption of rules, regulations, ordinances, resolutions, or other policy matters. And I think that might be significant, the fact that there's nothing in this policy that talks about appearances of conflicts. Per se, it's about,
It's so subjective.
now J does, J is avoid appearance of improper influence. And that's that's the gifts one. When you're receiving, soliciting, or accepting gifts, gratuities, hospitality, favor, you need to avoid the appearance of influence on gifts.
Who's deciding if it's an appearance of conflict?
Each individual council
And I
member.
think they're each on that, I know they're each required to turn in a monthly or maybe it's quarterly report to the clerk's office as to whether or not they received anything.
Right. Yeah, that I think is one area that they updated a couple months ago at our recommendation, and that is the report is annual. Public officials shall report any gift or gratuity valued at $50 or more on a yearly basis. A yearly report shall be filed with the city clerk. Because I think they were doing the monthlies, and I think we backed away on that. And remember, for the board members, we said you only have to do the annual report if you've accepted a gift or something, not just giving them a blank piece of paper to the clerk every year.
Not just more paperwork.
Yeah, exactly. They did update that.
You brought up earlier, so I think accepting some sort of discounted media rate that is an economy of scale. Resulting from the large volume of ads purchased on city push. I mean, I can't imagine that.
I think that's about the closest connection to the policy we've made so far, really. Because that's where it talks about avoiding the appearance. So the board, if you wanted to, you could suggest the council members be wary of accepting any discounted rates from companies that, like, for your campaign or for personal business. I mean, it doesn't have to be per se media stuff. It could be like a contractor who's going to put a addition onto my house and he's giving me a discount because I'm a city council member. Well, I should avoid that. And you need to charge me what you charge everybody. I mean,
And of course, there's more, a little more to that.
yeah,
Subsection J
okay.
than that. But at least it starts to touch on and control subsection of the policy. Don't accept anything of value. Which is intended or has the appearance of effect of influencing the performance of the officials' duties. Close that loop and satisfy that vision, but that's something that I guess for like talking points, things to avoid that could hypothetically occur. I think if there's some public connection between the entity that's providing the city's voluminous work and the same entity providing the individual politician work, I don't know if that's unethical, but does that create an appearance of anything? He's or she's the city's candidate because they have the same, I don't know, that's the.
And I do think it's useful and appropriate for you all as well. As a new board getting started figuring this out, they ask for your opinion. Very appropriate to refer them back to the policy. And then quoting specific, the things we've talked about is how I would write that up and portray that to them as, this was all background given to you all from our research of saying, well, here's what we found on this, but we didn't find much in the way of ethical implications. Of course, we're Googling that and trying to find connections. Well, if nobody has a policy, it's kind of like we didn't find much, but we told you everything we found. But your inclination was to go back to the reason the board exists is this policy. And I think, John, you said it very well there at the beginning too, is it's enforcing the policy, but there is a part of the policy that sets up an ethics officer who's supposed to be available for questions of ethical nature to each and every elected official. And so because that position isn't filled, this board isn't really
Equipped.
yeah, I mean, I think that's fair or expected to do that. And so some of it is just, it's all still too new. Is that fair, John? Is that what you were kind of getting at?
Well, that's how I started out. Then I gotta say, since there isn't an ethics officer, so that person's duties has fallen on us.
Yeah, true.
By what we're discussing it now.
Yeah, good point.
But I mean, I don't know if we're approved. But you sought specific approval, for example, me to do individual training and some investigative things. I don't know. This particular component would be a part of what we're approved to do, but
Do we know whether or not these contract provisions were reviewed by the law department, if they thought that was appropriate or not? Because I could see some real First Amendment issues of saying, well, I can't apply for this position because I do accept candidates, and it might be somebody for city council or mayor's position, and so I'm not eligible to even apply because of that. But they're saying I'm not allowed to do that if I want to have any city business, and so I don't know if that's a problem with it.
Yeah, if it's a policy up front, or if it's broadened from applying to in contractual language to specific vendors, if it's broadened to be a policy or contract language always required, okay, that's a policy. So then what they'll do is they'll tell, the purchasing department would tell these vendors this up front and say, if you want this, here's the draft contract, along with every other provision in our draft contract, is you got to agree to that. Doing that makes it, I mean, I kind of weigh it like it makes it more fair because you're telling them up front instead of at the last.
The only thing I'd be concerned about is because it's First Amendment issues. Can you put that in a contract? It's saying you're not welcome to apply because you handle advertising for candidates for public office and excluding them from consideration based on that. Since it's not just, it's something that's found in the Constitution as opposed to just whether it's a good idea.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
I definitely think they should refer it to their legal department since it's only applied to 2 vendors currently. And it seems like it could be a potential issue.
Yeah, I agree. I think their own legal department is probably better to advise them on this, kind of outside of what we're doing.
Is that fair to say that's unanimous?
Yeah.
Okay, because I don't want to overstep, but
And we would just refer them to the policy that is already there for their consideration.
yeah.
as to their own ethical obligations, I mean, I don't know that we asked to address
Right.
ethical implications of a third party, non-elected official or
Yeah,
appointed official, because certainly could be appearance of conflict by a company who's advocating for one individual, which might be in conflict with the body as a whole. But that's in our purview.
yeah. I think that's great, you guys. I mean, I'll redo the latter slides here and just say, here's the unanimous as far as the removing the advertising from the consideration, kind of stopping the scope of it. And then the legal opinion, and then otherwise reminding them of the policy and the board's. We understand you don't have an ethics officer to give you advice, so we're interpreting your request to the EAB as being, where you're getting the advice of the PPMC, the EAB, and the council to the PP. I think I should state that all three of us, it's like, I'm glad you said it out loud, because I wasn't really, I was like, well, I'm doing this research, but then this isn't really ethics advisory board. And then I tried to kind of connect it by saying, well, here's what I've found, here's all the background. Do you have any thoughts? And I think that's really what they're asking for is,
Yeah,
what advice do you have?
We haven't spoke to or analyzed the constitutional law issues, which are fairly complex and
Yeah,
and so just for my own clarification on the narrowing the scope of applicable entities, that's just us saying as a practical matter, we should limit the scope, not as an ethical matter, right?
right, exactly. Practical. Yeah, because
I don't know what,
when I go back to the very beginning, what they asked me for was, what are other cities doing? And how do you limit this? I mean, at what point do you say how much? And that's when I asked for all the data and said, well, how much work, what kind of work are you doing? And when you look through it all, it becomes pretty obvious that you don't want to have this apply to just some newspaper that you're publishing something in, or you're doing the creative work, whether it's a marketing firm doing it for you, or whether it's a city staff doing it for you, who cares? All you're doing is publishing it. And that's pretty much the same as printing. Like City Blue printed this for us or something, Kinko's printed this.
Yeah.
That's just like publishing it in the newspaper. It's like, just print this for us.
We really want to stop the Wichita Eagle from running political ads.
Yeah.
Because they have a printing contract.
And that was one of the questions, was kind of like, where do you stop this? Where do you say it's enough? And what I think we tried to do was educate ourselves on all these terminology in this world of PR, marketing, communications. What's what? What we learned is that there's a service called media buying. It's the company actually places your ad, whatever the content of the ad is. They're placing 3 on this television station and 4 on that one and 7 on this newspaper and 2 in that. I mean, they're just making choices about how to spend a marketing budget and what to buy. The other one is creative work, saying, do you say, Kansas, or do you say, click your heels, Kansas, or whatever. I mean, it's the content of, and then the one that we found does both. I mean, the firm did both. He created the content and he placed the ads, and that was the Next Star one. But,
yeah, I would say clear that's not like an ethical or legal opinion.
yes.
Providing advice.
Yes, I will draw a line and say, well, that's me helping do research for y'all, but the board really didn't have any opinion on that.
They, they recognize the practical implications.
Yes, the practical. Thank you for that.
Analyzing our assignment of.
If you're just trying to help narrow the scope, then that is a practical thing, not an ethical thing. Yeah. Now, there's a chance they'll hear kind of what we've heard and come up with more questions or issues, and we'll be back. Otherwise, regardless, next month's meeting, I'll let y'all know kind of how it is and how it went and what they said, and if they want us to do anything more or have any other specific questions. Sometimes, people don't have specific questions until they see data, understand the issue better, and then they might, come back with something else. So. But these are yours too. Anything else on this? Thank you all for opening your minds to thinking about a new topic tonight. You never know what you'll get asked to do, right? If there's nothing else, and if you think of anything later that you think, oh, I should have thought of that, just drop me an email or give me a call. I have another 2 weeks, I guess, no, I have another week to finish this up. I have to turn it in on the 22nd, I guess, so. If not, then let's see, next meeting is set for July 13th. And if we do not need the meeting, we will cancel. If I'm still working on this, we may not need it. I will tell you that the other thing I'm working on is the RFP for an ethics officer. And working with city staff to figure that out. At first, I had thought I would bring that to you all to go over, but then I don't know that that's the way they want to do it. I think we need to get it drafted, and it's kind of on hold pending this media thing, but I'll get back to that and draft it. And then, but at least I can probably at least give you an email and say, here's what's happening and here's when it's going out on the street and that kind of thing. But we need to get a little further down the road of that before we know anything. So if there's nothing for you to do in July, we'll take a summer vacation.
Yeah.
Okay, shall
So have
we?
you heard all of the complaints that are there?
Yes, everything we had has been adjudicated at this point. You've seen everything that we received, other than a couple that didn't get as far as you, because per the policy, there's an initial review and they didn't pass the initial muster. Some of them didn't pass for technical things early on and got corrected. Oh, this wasn't notarized. You forgot to sign it, whatever. Well, we just went back to them and said, you forgot to sign it, or wasn't mostly it was notarized. And so they went back and finished those and refiled them. So you've seen all those. But I think there might have been one or two that didn't get this as far as this group because they just didn't meet the requirements of the
But it's
ordinance.
now campaign season, so.
It is, so
That
don't
can
say
bring
too
some
loud.
out.
Yeah, don't say too
The
loud.
closer we get, the more likely we're gonna see some complaints.
But we'll bask in the summer glory of nothing outstanding at this point, because I know for several months it was slogging through one by one, just to,
Backlog.
yes, that backlog. And I know people were very frustrated that why did this take so long? Yep, I understand. It's
We didn't
new.
exist.
We don't have a process. We're sorry, but so it does feel good to be caught up, that's for sure. Well, shall we adjourn? It looks like 7:23.
Yep.
I think we do we do motions to adjourn? I think we do.
Some places.
Seems like we
I
do.
motion to adjourn.
Vicky, second, and way to go.
Yeah.
All those
Right in
in favor? And we're 5-0. We are adjourned 7:23 PM. We'll get to the library.
Some boards have been on as